If your AI coding assistant keeps producing messy, throwaway code in your complex codebase, the problem might not be the model but rather how you're managing its context window. That's the central argument from Dex Horthy in his talk titled No Vibes Allowed, where he shares hard-won lessons about making AI assistants actually work in real-world, brownfield codebases. His 3-person team achieved 2 to 3 times their previous throughput, but only after fundamentally rethinking their workflow. Horthy starts with a sobering observation. Anthropic surveyed 100,000 developers and found that AI-assisted software engineering often produces heavy rework and what he calls codebase churn. This is especially true in existing codebases with established patterns and constraints. His own initial experience with Claude Code was underwhelming until his team discovered that the breakthrough wasn't about prompting tricks or model upgrades. It was about engineering context deliberately. Here's the core insight that changed everything for his team. Large language models are stateless. The only lever you have for better output is putting better tokens into the context window. This makes context engineering the central optimization problem, not prompt engineering in the traditional sense. Horthy introduces the concept of a dumb zone, which begins around 40% of context capacity. As the window fills with search results, tool outputs, and conversation history, performance degrades noticeably. The model becomes less coherent and more prone to errors. Most engineers let conversations balloon until they hit obvious failures, but by then significant damage is already done. His solution is what he calls intentional compaction. Rather than letting a single conversation grow indefinitely, teams should frequently summarize progress into a markdown file and start fresh with clean context. This keeps the agent operating in what he calls the smart zone, roughly the first 40% of capacity where performance remains strong. This leads to his research plan implement workflow. First, you use the AI to research the codebase and compress that understanding into a research document. Then you distill your intent into a detailed plan with concrete code snippets and line numbers. Only then do you execute. Each phase produces an artifact that can be reviewed and corrected before errors multiply downstream. Horthy emphasizes that a bad line of research can cascade into hundreds of bad lines of code. Therefore, human review should focus on the highest leverage artifacts, which are the research and planning documents, not just the final code diff. He suggests attaching planning artifacts or agent transcripts to pull requests so reviewers can follow the reasoning behind changes. He's also critical of how teams use subagents. The temptation is to anthropomorphize them into roles like front-end agent or QA agent. But subagents should function as disposable research forks that return succinct findings and then disappear. Their purpose is context control, not organizational metaphor. Another practical insight concerns documentation. Pre-written onboarding docs tend to drift out of sync with actual code. On-demand compressed context, meaning research generated fresh from the live codebase, is more reliable. He recommends progressive disclosure for repo documentation. Place a concise context file at the root with additional detail deeper in the directory tree. This way agents load only what they need for a given task. Perhaps most importantly, Horthy stresses that AI cannot replace thinking. It can only amplify whatever thinking, or lack thereof, the human has already done. Teams that try to outsource understanding to the model end up with slop. Teams that invest in clear intent and structured context get reliable results. He closes by noting that the coming challenge is cultural, not technical. As AI-generated code scales toward the majority of output, organizations need to adapt workflows and governance structures. This cultural change must come from technical leadership. Senior engineers are already cleaning up code produced by those who haven't learned these disciplines, and that tension will only grow. The concrete takeaway is this. When your context drifts or exceeds 40% capacity, stop, have the agent summarize progress into a file, and restart with a clean window. Match your context engineering effort to task complexity. Skip heavy research for trivial changes but invest fully for cross-system features. And always review the plan before you review the code, because that's where mistakes compound.